Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jo Lovelock, leader of Reading Council. I just want to thank Reading College for hosting this event. Leslie and her team have been brilliant, so thank you very much. And thank you also to everybody giving up their time this morning to come along. I know it was short notice, so thank you very much. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Ed Miliband, leader of the Labour Party.
Thanks very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming here today. Thank you, Leslie, and Reading College for hosting us here. I have to say, walking in and seeing all of the people, the students, staff gathered was an incredibly inspiring thing. And it was actually talking to people on the way up the stairs, as my journey up the stairs took longer than I think people anticipated. It was incredibly inspiring. I'll just tell you one story about a young woman I met who is 32, has 2 kids, decided she wanted to come back to learning and now wants to be a teacher, has just got a place at Oxford Brookes. This is why it took me a long time to get up the stairs, because we had a long conversation. Has just got a place at Oxford Brookes, 1,100 people competing for places. 9 she got in, and she's one of them. And it's absolutely brilliant. So look, there's some people here from the college, some people not. Can we give a big round of applause to Leslie and the college for what they're doing? Now look, the reason I'm here and the reason why we're doing this event is that I want to change the way politics is done. Because God knows politics needs to change. It needs to change because, frankly, people are cynical, not just about this government, and I'll say something about them during the course of today, but about all politics. And one of the ways to change politics is to have sessions like this. We've got some people who are Labour Party supporters, some Labour members here, some people who aren't Labour supporters, some local businesses, some students who've come along. One thing I say about these events, ask me any question you like. You know, ask me difficult questions. We've got the BBC here. Don't let that put you off. Maybe it'll inspire you. But seriously, this is about your chance to ask me questions. Now, I normally take questions in groups of 3. That probably means that you'll think he's going to avoid the difficult second question that he gets asked. Call me on it if I do. I will try and give as much time as possible for question and answer and genuine dialogue. There'll be people at the back making rude signs to tell me to wind up. I tend to ignore them, but eventually they get their way. I do want to tell you just one funny story. I've been travelling around a lot during these local elections, and we were on a train. We've been on trains a lot, and we were on an incredibly packed commuter train going to Thurrock. And it was a sort of packed carriage. And there's a colleague with me who's standing at the back, who I always embarrass on these occasions, James. And he was sitting next to a lady. And you know, sometimes you sort of have these experiences of people coming up to you on trains. And she texted the person opposite her to say, "Do you realise we're sitting in a carriage with 2 of those Miliband brother lookalikes?" Anyway, James has never quite recovered from the insult. What do I want to talk to you about before we get into the question and answer session and the dialogue? Look, I suppose it's about how we, the Labour Party, win your trust. We lost a general election badly 2 years ago, including here in Reading. And I hope we can win Reading back at the next election. Now, how do we win back trust from people? Here's the way I think about it. I think lots of people thought this government was going to deliver change for them. They came in and they said, the economy, we're going to deliver change. Fairness, we're going to deliver change. The NHS, David Cameron said, I'm a different type of Conservative. I'm going to change the way I do things. I think that they've betrayed those promises of change. What's our task? Our task is to show you we can change things in a way that is credible. Now, one of the things that I think hopefully you're going to be handed out at the end or later on is something where we think we can deliver change. And it's about action to protect family budgets and living standards. And I just want to sort of talk to you briefly about this, because I think it's very, very important. Some people will say, look, there's no money around, you can't make a difference. I think you can make a difference by making different choices. We've just seen a budget that cut taxes for millionaires and raised taxes for millions of people. That's not my priority. My priority is not to cut the 50 pence tax rate for people earning over £150,000 a year. I think it would have been better to protect Britain's pensioners rather than doing that. My priority is to protect them, to protect people who are working hard, like the lady I met, who's probably getting tax credits if she goes into work. So I have a different set of priorities from this government. And this question of priorities, I think, is really one of the biggest issues we face in our politics in the coming years. Take the issue of tuition fees, and some people may want to ask about this. You know, the £9,000 tuition fee, I think, does hold back people from applying to university, and I'm sure there's a local experience here suggesting that. What do I say? I would love to go further and say we're going to abolish the tuition fee, have a dramatic change. I say, what can we afford to do? We can afford to cut the tuition fee to £6,000 by not going ahead with some of the tax cuts for the banks that this government wants to bring in. I say also for young people, somebody asked me about youth jobs and getting the chance of getting into work on the way up. I say, actually, if we tax the bankers' bonuses, we could use that money to guarantee jobs for all of our young people unemployed for more than 12 months. And so I think part of our task is to make promises to you which are realistic and promises to you that can change the way things work in this country. And I think we can do that. And that's really what I'm interested in doing, because I think this is a country that does want change, but it wants credible change and change that they can believe in.
I'm Sally Dickett's I'm Chief Executive of the OCVC group that has responsibility for Reading College.
Go on, what's, sorry, OCVC?
It is Oxford and Cherwell Valley College, and we have responsibility for that college, Reading, and potentially a local 14 to 19 school. My programme, my question is about entrepreneurs and apprenticeships. Apprenticeships, I think, are fantastic, and I think they're great for training people for today. But when you get into power, you need to be training people for tomorrow as well. What is your view of actually including creativity and entrepreneurship in the education of our apprentices so that they're worthwhile in our economy, not only when they come out today, but they're actually of value to society tomorrow and in the future?
Do you mean while they're at school, or do you mean while people are...
While they're actually doing apprenticeships, I think the training we do is too narrow, and we train them literally for walking out into today's job. Today's job is gone within about 48 hours, and we need to be training them for what Britain needs tomorrow, and I think that's about creativity
really interesting.
and entrepreneurship.
Notwithstanding the fantastic work that's done at the college, and I'd be interested to know what Leslie thinks about this, I don't really feel, looking at the curriculum for 14 to 19, that it's necessarily right in all its particulars. I personally think we are too narrow in our educational outlook in this country. I welcomed what Ed Balls did to try and introduce a diploma system, which I think was trying to expand the kind of range of things that people did, and also, let's be frank about it, break down the long-standing vocational academic divide, which is a massive problem in this country. Now, your point was about creativity. I'm sure that's part of the answer, and I'm sure that's part of what needs to be done. I'd be interested to know from you, what change does that require, do you think, in the apprenticeships that people do?
I think to really develop creativity, we've got to engage learners in a different way. I mean, one of the things that we are looking at as two colleges is actually getting students to run their own business. So they're running a business while they're learning. They can experiment with it.
And how is that going?
The students absolutely love it, because they make a profit. They share half to the college, half to the student, so they're earning money. But the qualification system just frankly screws it up.
Why? Because there isn't flexibility in it.
And it's
really interesting.
And enterprise and creativity isn't measured. So we as colleges are measured on outcomes, which is quite right. Students come here, they should get a qualification, but their qualification is in a very narrow field. So if they can, I don't know, cook a meal, great, but we're saying we want them to cook the meal and then actually sell it and cost it and make a profit. And I think there's so much we can do with our curriculum if we flex up our qualifications.
Okay, well, look, I take that lesson. That's very, very important.
Hey, my name's Reese Lowe.
Yeah, Reese.
With
So Reese is doing 2 jobs. Let me just give Reese's biography. Reese is doing 2 jobs, and he's president of the student union, and you're doing A-levels. Is that right?
Yeah.
Go on.
With unemployment, 16 to 24-year-olds at 22.5%, not taking into account students who are technically already employed in education, what other policies do you intend to adopt in order to stimulate employment for young people?
Okay.
My name's Rose Turner. I'm the Vice Principal at the college here, and it really carries on from Reese's question. With the 16 to 24-year-old age group being at the forefront of unemployment at the moment, it seems a bit crazy to me that small businesses, when they take on apprenticeships, and most of our apprenticeships are come from small businesses, that the 16 to 18 age group, the employer doesn't have to pay anything. But for the 19 to 24-year-old age group, employers are expected to pay 50% of the training fee for an apprenticeship.
So sorry,
and that is a disincentive.
So here I'm learning something important. 16 to 18.
Yeah.
You have
16 to 18, a small business wouldn't have to pay a fee for an apprenticeship to be trained. But if you are over 19, the employer is expected to pay 50% of the cost of the training. And in some cases, I mean, there's a young lady sitting behind you who's doing heating and ventilation, and the cost of that apprenticeship is probably around about £8,000. So the small business would be expected to pay 50% of that. And that is a disincentive for small businesses to take on apprenticeships, especially for the over 19. And when we've got unemployment so high for the 19 to 24-year-old age group, it seems rather a perverse thing. And I wondered if the Labour Party were looking at that.
Well, it's definitely worth looking at. Let me start with that and come to Reese's question. So when I go around the country, I think one of the things that people agree on, left, right, centre, is leaving young people out of work makes no sense at all. It's totally crazy. I grew up in the 1980s, and I never thought I'd see again a lost generation of young people who are looking for work for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. What can I promise? What can I say we would do? I've said we'll levy a tax on the bankers' bonuses, and goodness knows they're carrying on unchecked, and use that money to put young people back to work. And what can we guarantee? Well, we've come up with a plan to say we pay the wages, so the government would pay the wages, at least the minimum wage for 25 hours a week. Employers have to do something. They've got to provide the training. So you can't just say to employers, well, we're going to give you this young person and you don't have to do anything, because I think you've got to have the employer having some sense that they've got an interest in this. And the young person would have to take one of the opportunities available. Now, I think that that's sensible. And why have we proposed this? Because if you look at what's happened over the last year, the number of young people looking for work for more than 12 months has skyrocketed, including here in Reading. I think it's like over 100% it's gone up by. It's more than doubled here in Reading. And so I think that's the right thing to do. Now, on the apprenticeship point, I confess I didn't know about the detail of that funding thing, and it's again something that we should look at. Look, it doesn't seem to me to make sense to be, if you like, disincentivizing small businesses from providing the apprenticeships for people. So again, something definitely worth looking at. Reece, do you want to just say something just about the mood among young people here? I mean, I think this is a fantastic place, and it's incredibly inspiring to talk to the young people here, but what are people feeling about the prospects?
Many people just can't get a job. I mean, like, I've known friends of mine, they've been searching everywhere for jobs. They can't find any anywhere. They find it hard to support themselves, especially if EMA and ALG gone out the window. They haven't got any finances to even study. So it's like a massive problem for loads of young people. Yeah.
My question is, you're bringing in jobs for 18 to 24-year-olds.
Yeah.
You're trying to guarantee these. My question is, one, what are the quality of these jobs going to be?
Yeah.
And are they going to be minimum wage or high-quality jobs? And what are you going to do about graduate unemployment as well? Because you have people coming out with degrees and going into jobs in barmaids, McDonald's, and not making full use of their skills. And so what are you going to be doing about opening up more graduate prospects?
I will answer your question, I promise. What subjects are you doing here?
I'm doing A-level here.
What A-level?
Biology, history, and English Lit Lang.
Was that closely fought election?
Sorry?
Was it a closely fought election?
I think it was, actually.
It was. Well, congratulations. Are you doing it for a year?
2 years. I'm on my last year now.
But the vice presidency is for a year, is it?
Yeah, it's about a year.
Hi, Simon Blake from DMB Carpenters Limited. I'm just completing my level 3 carpentry apprenticeship. I'd like to know
how is it going?
Yeah, very well. Yes.
And is that how long is
3 years?
3 years.
Yeah, so 2 years for the MBQ2 and then another year for the MBQ3.
And that's been 3 years at the college.
That's correct. Yeah.
And are you now, you're based at a firm?
I am. Yeah, a carpentry construction company building new build residential housing.
What were you doing before, if I may ask?
I was an accountant before.
My goodness.
Yeah. Moved out of that.
Well, that's interesting. I promise I'll let you get to your question. Tell me about what motivated the career change?
Basically, an opportunity came up with my brother to set up a carpentry company.
Congratulations.
I ran the office side of it, he ran the carpenters, and I thought it would be good for me to also learn the carpentry
Accountant
skills,
turned carpenter. Let's hope for politicians, yeah. God, did you ask a question?
I just wondered how you think we can change the impression in the industry of people with NVQs as they come in, to change it from being not very qualified as it's currently possibly thought of in our industry certainly, to becoming a proper recognised qualification that does carry a lot of meaning to it.
So you're saying something very interesting to me, which I think is an important perception change for me. You're saying actually it's a really good qualification.
Yes, certainly I've learned to do the job, but people in the industry don't view this qualification as protect.
Can I pick on Leslie just for a minute? Not to sort of answer the question. Well, actually, to answer the question, no. But just on this thing. So, what is the reason why? Simon, yeah. Simon says there's a perception issue about the NVQ.
I mean, you touched on it when you were talking to some of the students, Ed. There is still a sense in the country of the vocational academic divide. And in the college here in particular, we challenge that every day. You met students who were doing plumbing, carpentry, engineering, catering, and I could go, health and social care, I could go on and on. And these are the people who keep the country running in all sorts of different ways. But I believe that those skills are not as valued as they should be. We still value, or I say we, but certainly not me, those skills such as academic skills more highly than those vocational skills. And we've just heard here about the transformation of somebody's life and also the development of skills so he can actually go and do a job. And that is through training here and working with an employer. And to me, that is more valuable than any kind of training you can get.
I'm quite enjoying this. I'm now going to sort of play ping pong. So do you think that's... So Leslie's sort of saying that the reason that the part of it is just the wider kind of snobbery in a way in Britain between those who do academic qualifications and those who don't. Do you think that's it, or do you think there's something else?
I do. I agree with that. There's certainly a need for both.
Don't feel you have to agree with her, by the way.
I've only got 2 more weeks left.
Exactly. There's not much she can do. There's not much she can do.
But certainly coming from an academic background myself, where I had to pass professional examinations, etc., there is a need for both sides, certainly. And a lot of the people that I will be working for haven't come from that academic background at all, and they may not have even done
really
an
interesting.
MBQ. They'll have just trained themselves up as they've learnt on the job, and they feel possibly more superior to someone who's just trained as an MVQ person. So
we've got to find a way in which we celebrate things that go beyond financial services. So we celebrate engineering. At the engineering firm I was at earlier on today, it's exactly what they were saying to me. Look, why don't we celebrate engineers? We're a country with an incredibly proud history in engineering. Why don't we do more to celebrate it? So I think that it's not a complete answer, but I think that's part of the answer. Yeah. Vice President, what was your name? I'm sorry. Nishat. I'll call you Vice President rather than sort of proper respect. Quality of jobs. This is a big issue. It's a very big issue because there's skepticism about schemes and whether they can work. We've said they would have to be minimum wage jobs. The government got into trouble over this business of their work experience program. I wasn't against work experience, but I think as long as you don't see it as a substitute for actually a paid job later on. And so we say they've got to be minimum wage jobs, at least 6 months, and the employer's got to provide, Mr. President wants to ask you a follow-up question, I'll come back to you, and they've got to be, proper training provided by the employer. Graduate unemployment is a massive issue. 1 in 5 graduates, you said it in terms of your experience, are doing jobs which don't require graduate level skills. Why is that? It's because of what's happening to the economy. Because the economy at the moment is just not creating enough jobs. Now, personally, I think that's because of the way the government is going about their programme of cuts, because I think they went, as we say, too far, too fast. That's not just a slogan, that's what we believe, because they're taking too much out of the economy, and the economy isn't creating the jobs that are necessary. Yeah.
Can I just add on to that?
Yeah.
What's to say though, if these with these graduate unemployments,
yeah,
they're going to be taking the jobs that you're trying to create for those who want these minimum wage jobs, who need it more, and it's just not going to create a knock-on effect.
I mean, look, it's interesting. You might have thought that. Our experience when we had a programme called the Future Jobs Fund when we were in government, some people will have known about that programme. I met some people who'd benefited from it recently, and they were going into not incredibly highly paid jobs, but good jobs, and they're still in those jobs. So I think, I suppose if I was the Prime Minister, I'd be saying this is a national emergency, youth unemployment. It is a national emergency to have 1 million young people out of work. And you know, I would be banging on the door of every business in the country, businesses that employ people at the minimum wage and above the minimum wage, saying, look, you've got a responsibility to be part of this. Government's going to do its bit. And I actually think you could mobilise people around that.
Yeah, this kind of links back to Nishat's point about minimum wage. It was kind of a soft topic in her question, but inflation is on the rise, and it's showing that in this, as of this year, well, even with minimum wage on the rise, inflation is on the rise, and it's shown in 2004 that people had a lot more spending power in correlation rate of inflation. Now, what policies do you intend to adopt to ensure that people's that living standards don't drop and people still have right spending power?
Well, look, one of the things is this thing about what I've been saying about where the priorities lie. You know, the fact that people with tax credits are seeing their money cut back when actually they spend a lot of their income doesn't make any sense. And cutting taxes for millionaires definitely doesn't make sense in my view. It's the wrong priority for our economy and for our society as well. But we also say, look, in the short term, we should put more money into the economy through a cut in VAT. We've said that because we think it's necessary to boost the economy. Now, that may, let's see, you know, where we are in a few years' time on that. But at the moment, we think that'll be the right short-term measure.
Yeah, I'm Sam.
Sam.
It was basically about gas and electricity bills are massively on the rise. And the main problem is sort of back at the roots, the fact that the house isn't being built properly with insulation. I mean, I've been on recent jobs and have been poorly built, and it's costing us and communities fortunes to with gas and electricity bills at the end of the year. What would, if you got into power, what would your government do to ensure that you go back to the roots and back to the learning, so that people who taught properly how to build houses? I mean, we're miles behind places like Sweden and Germany for eco-friendliness on housing.
It's really interesting. Are you a student here?
I am, yeah. So.
And you're and also with PG Morris Carpentry Limited. If you want good carpentry, you know where to go. So you think it's because they're being built, houses are being built to too low a standard?
Yeah, I mean, in comparison to people like countries like Germany, Sweden, other places in Europe, we are miles behind them.
It's really interesting. Okay, I mean, Sam, I think what you said is fascinating, really, really interesting. We brought in something called zero carbon homes, which I think the government has sort of messed around with, which was precisely to say, look, homes have to be built to a much higher environmental standard, and actually that is good for energy efficiency as well, and it should be put in as a kind of standard thing. I mean, personally, I also think in the private rented sector, we were introducing a register which demanded certain standards of energy efficiency. I sort of think we've got to think about all of that, because look, you're totally right in the way you put it. Unless you tackle this problem at the root of high energy bills, it's going to be a problem. I mean, I think there's actually 3 things you've got to do. You've got to tackle the problem at the root. You've got to provide proper insulation and all that for people in existing homes. And you've got to say, look, when the companies are making money, of course they've got to make some money, but it's got to be fair. You see, look, I'm somebody who says actually over time energy prices will rise, but what worries me is that people think energy prices are rising not because of tackling climate change or whatever, but because the companies are just making big profits. And so, you know, I always used to say when I was the energy secretary, I always used to say to the companies, look, you know, you can only take people with you on this if they think, well, it's actually fair. The way this is being done is fair. People aren't being ripped off. So I think there's three things that need to be done. But what you said was really, really interesting. So I think getting rid of the EMA was in a way worse than the tripling of tuition fees for educational opportunity. And that message has come through loud and clear here and elsewhere. This is in a way, goes back to where I started. What can I promise? We're going to have to see where we are at the election in terms of what I can say on the EMA. I sometimes say on these occasions, I don't want to be like Nick Clegg and make you a promise and then, you know, end up breaking it. And I think, look, I'll be frank with you. You know, part of the problem we all face in politics is that, you know, politicians come along, make big promises, and then don't keep them. Now, in London at the moment, we've got a mayoral election. Ken Livingstone is putting forward his policy on the educational maintenance allowance, bringing it back across London. He's found a way of doing that. I would like to do that. I can't promise it. I do think the government made a terrible mistake. I make one point which may sound a bit off from another track. I'm for votes at 16. I'm certainly for votes for the fantastic 16 to 18-year-olds I've met in this college. Why am I for votes at 16? Partly because I think, if you take the issue of the EMA, would the government, in one stroke, in a spending review, have got rid of the EMA when there are 1.5 million 16 to 18-year-olds? I think they would have thought twice about it. Because I think they'd have said, hang on a minute, you know, there's nothing to put pressure on voters like people being able to vote. And they'd have thought, well, actually, this is an important constituency that is not going to be very happy with what we are doing. And look, I think if you can pay taxes and all of that, you know, you should be able to vote. Let me just say a couple of concluding words. First of all, sorry that not everybody who maybe wanted to get the chance to ask a question did get the chance to ask it. There may be other issues you want to take up with Joe and the council, and you should definitely do that. I think what's great, if I may say so, Joe, about what you're doing here in Reading is you're showing that even though you've got tough times and even though it's difficult in terms of the budgets, you're protecting libraries, you're protecting youth services. In fact, increasing spending, as I understand it, on youth services, which is a major achievement given all of the pressures that you face. And so, look, I wish you very best of luck in the elections. The only other thing to say is to return to where I started and to thank the college. It's absolutely been fantastic to visit here. And I genuinely meant what I said at the beginning, which is we are trying to do politics in a different way and trying to answer the questions people have. And I'm going to keep doing this around the country in the coming 3 years, probably until the general election, and hopefully after, because I think that you can watch me and David Cameron shouting at each other at Prime Minister's questions, which I've got to do tomorrow. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's less fun, depending on how it goes. I don't think it's that enlightening for people about politics. And as a gentleman, I think you agrees. It doesn't give the best impression of politics and what politics is about. I want to find different ways of doing that. It's only possible with folks like you who come to these meetings. Thank you to you. Thank you very much to the college. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.